scenario by somebody that did a comparison between Zimbabwe and South Africa, and they said, well, Zimbabwe is a landlocked country, and South Africa is not a landlocked country. And one of its benefits is the trade that it has, with international trade, especially with the Suez Canal sort of closing down. And so almost that analogy, it almost throws the Zimbabwean and South African attorney to a Zimbabwean. So I've also got the optimistic viewpoint over there.
No, that's not a fair comparison. That's not apples for apples at all. As to Owen's point about buying a 10-year government bond, one must remember that the sovereign risk is always in any risk that you take. So even if you're buying an industrial property, you're still taking the sovereign risk. And so when comparing the returns, you must consider that sovereign risk forms an element also of the risk that you're taking if you're buying an industrial property in South Africa, and then include that in the return comparison. I agree.
That's a very valid point Renier just made there. One way of looking at a nearly 11% income yield initially is that compare that to property. Let's say you can buy a house at an 8% initial yield. Then implicitly, in order to beat the bond yield of say 11, your property has to grow in capital value or in rental rates. It's got to grow by 11 minus 8. In other words, 3% per annum. Now you could argue that is a reasonable expectation, except that when we're going to have a 2% growth in GDP over the next 5 years, then all of a sudden it doesn't look all that attractive. It's okay, but the problem with owning a property especially in South Africa at the moment, is that your operating costs are growing faster than the CPI, than the Consumer Price Index, right? So if your gross rental is going to grow, or your market rental is going to grow at say 3% per annum, then don't expect your net income to grow at 3% per annum. Right?
Yeah. So be wary of sectional title, for instance, where the levy and the growth in the levy, for instance, has a real depressing effect. And levies have been increasing in residential sectional title developments far in excess of CPI, for reasons that are unrelated to which are sort of based on all sorts of things. And so being careful of a sectional title is definitely something that I would advocate.
But Renier, I disagree with that. It also applies to owning your own house, a non-sectional title house. There also, you've got rates and taxes, and you've got insurance, and you've got
all growing at faster than inflation.
Well, it's all kind of utilities, which obviously outpaces any.
And to come back to the Zimbabwe story, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that theory. Switzerland is a good example. Switzerland is also landlocked.